All right. Well, thank you for joining us today here on a lovely day in Tucson. It is sunny out there and it is beautiful, and we are getting ready for Dr. Peter Megaw's thrilling presentation on Santa Eulalia. Now, Peter has been doing Santa Eulalia since, gosh, back when rocks were young. So he is, I don't think anyone's going to contradict me if I say he is the world's expert on what's going down there in Santa Eulalia. So we have about just under 10 minutes before we do our show. I'll just show you real quick in the conference room there. We got Peter, we got Stuart, and we are just about ready to go. We're waiting for the final people to come in. This was actually one of the sold out events here at Tucson Fine Mineral Gallery. So it's pretty much, if you're not here, well, if you're here, you're not watching me anyway. But if you're not here, this is pretty much the only way to catch the presentation. So it is being recorded, and it will be re-released a little bit later in the year. And so if you can hang out for just a few minutes more, we got everybody mic'd, and we're just doing the last minute checks to make sure that this is going to be the thrilling presentation that I know it will be. So hang out. I'm going to put a little music on, and we will be back with you in just under 8 minutes now. Ooh, see, I can use that time, I guess. I don't know. But yeah, just hang out. We'll be back with you soon. All right, we are about at the 5 minute mark. It's going to be just barely under 5 minutes before we start the show. I wanted to tell all of you that if you haven't had a chance to check out some of the posts that Blue Cap Productions has been doing, we have the What's Hot in Tucson 2025 live series. And every day we're trying to put up new posts. These are very condensed versions of the longer in-person interviews that we're doing with dealers at Mineral City here at the Tucson Fine Mineral Gallery. We just finished one with Daniel next door, Daniel Trinchillo from Fine Minerals International. That's actually going to go up by the end of this presentation, 3 o'clock Tucson time. That's going up. So if you want a little flavor of Tucson and you weren't able to make it out here this year, then that's something to watch for. If you're not in Tucson yet and you're planning on coming out, maybe that's something you can take a look at and visit some of the dealers that we've been featuring there. And well, hey, even if you're in Tucson and that we're showing, it'd be a good thing to see. Everybody's starting to pour into Tucson now. It's getting really excited. I was most excited today because look who showed up here at the Tucson Fine Mineral Gallery. That is my partner in crime, Dr. Eloise Gaillou. And when Gaillou is in the house, you know the party has started. So Eloise is in town. I don't think Raquel is coming to town yet. She should be in the next day or so. Remember, this Wednesday is Mineral Talks Live. So make sure you tune into that. And so, gosh, I think we're just about 3 minutes until the show. Also, remember that if you're free and if you're available, tomorrow at this same time, we're going to have a fantastic presentation by Mary Vandera and Todd Wax, both of who are here in the Tucson Fine Mineral Gallery. They are set up in Patrick Dreher's space. Patrick has been gracious enough to allow them to come in and exhibit in his space, but they have done some fantastic, fantastic jewelry work. Great people, great presenters, and that'll be tomorrow, 2 p.m. Tucson time. For right now, we are waiting for the hour so that we can start and we can go live with Peter Megaw here, 2 p.m. We are almost ready to go, so keep tuned. And wow, we're down to the final 2 minutes. So keep tuned and we will be with you momentarily. All right, we are down to our last minute before the show. I'm that myself. We have, there we go. We got Stuart there. We got Peter there. That's David Mustard in the foreground there, that kind of white blondish ponytail that is facing us. And David has got a great presentation coming up later in the speaker series. And that's going to be on gold. So make sure that you tune in for that. Check the website. You'll see exactly when the date is. I don't have it off the top of my head, although I could probably easily look it up if I can do that before the show starts. Let's see. David Mustard is on. He's going to be 2 p.m. Wednesday, February 12th. So that's going to be kind of a cool show to watch. It looks like we're ready to go. So I'm going to give Stuart the thumbs up, and away we go. Stuart, we're ready to go, buddy. Not sure if Stuart heard me, so bear with us. We're about ready to start. Okay, let's do that.
Maybe.
Oh, much better.
Let's
Start from
see.
the beginning. If you
Okay.
wouldn't mind.
Well, third time's the charm. All right.
Getting a lot of feedback.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, that's probably just you, Dennis.
Feedback. No, he's giving me feedback. Yeah, well, we wish you good night. Isn't that what we're supposed to sing now that we're in feedback?
All right. So we'll do take 3 here. Again, welcome everyone. Thank you for your patience. It's my honor and privilege to introduce Dr. Peter Megaw and his presentation this afternoon on the Santa Eulalia Mining District in Chihuahua. So without any further ado, Peter, take it away.
Thank you, Stu. Pleasure to be so nicely introduced 3 times. And can we kill some of these lights, Stu? No. Okay. It just makes it hard to see the screen, that's all. We don't want to burn any light. All right, so I've had a little experience with Santa Eulalia, so I'm going to tell you a little about the history of the geology and then the gorgeous minerals that come from there. So start by thanking Jeff Stovall for lots of the pictures, Jim McGlasson working with him for years, Bill Pansner for years of working with him, Jerry Perez of Wolfenita, and Zach Jibrin, who's responsible for microphotographs. You always like to dedicate my talks to the memory of Dr. Miguel Romero, who really was the Mexican mineral collector of all time. Also acknowledge Bob Jones, who passed away this last year, but also has a history with Santa Eulalia, which we will get into briefly. That's him ducking into the camp. 1978. He was a good friend. Spent a lot of time with him underground. Knew the mine like the back of his hand. Oh, that's him sitting on a chunk of massive galena. That's the kind of stuff that they mined a couple thousand tons a day of during the heyday of the mining in Santa Eulalia. And as always, thanks to the generation of risqueros, the miners of Mexico who risked their lives to go underground and bring out those specimens that we love so well. And yes, that's actually how they do it. That they go up as much as 18 levels of ladders, about 35 meters between levels, one after another, with as much as 100 kilograms on their back or actually slung off their head. That's a famous painting of Santa Eulalia, who was a 13-year-old Spanish martyr who became the patron saint of lost causes, which is extremely appropriate for mining. I spent a lot of time in Santa Eulalia, wrote an issue of Mineralogical Record, and so I'm trying not to repeat the stuff that you can read in that issue. So it's things that have happened since then, things that didn't make that article, or things that are in that article but are essential for making the talk to make sense. So Santa Eulalia sits in this mountain range right over here. I started doing my master's thesis here in the Sierra Pastorias. When I turn the highlight off, you can see this sort of concentric set of mountains. That's a Yellowstone type resurgent caldera, and this is all just barely south of the city of Chihuahua. Mateo and Chino Irigoyen are stalwarts of the mineral specimen community. I met them when I first started working there. Mateo unfortunately passed away, but Chino is still operating the rock shop of Santa Eulalia. So when I first went out there, I had in my pocket. I was a starving graduate, and people were offering stuff like this for sale for, well, you could actually buy things like this sort of with 12. And I sort of went, wow, that's pretty nice stuff. So I bought a few things, came back to school. Ed Huskinson showed up to go to school, and he said, well, those are nice specimens. You might be able to pay for a degree with those if you can get enough of them.
So I did, and then Ed brought me to my first Tucson show, introduced me to Miguel Romero, taught me what made a good specimen, encouraged me to focus, to develop a focus for my collecting, which started at Eulalia and the world, and now has Santa Eulalia plus Mexico. So this is where Santa Eulalia sits, back to other places you might have heard of, like Nica and Los Lamentos, San Pedro Corralito, San Carlos, La Aurora, and Ojuela over to, that's actually not Ojuela, that's the Garnet locality, Cerro Las Cruces. So Santa Eulalia is a carbonate replacement deposit. That means this is a high temperature deposit hosted in stone. These things are massive sulfide replacements of the limestone. That's what a good face of a replacement deposit looks like. That runs about 35% zinc, 45% lead, and 2.5 kilograms per ton of silver. These things are relations, so you look for the intrusion. You make money off a whole bunch of different elements: silver, lead, zinc, copper, and gold. And these deposits are multi-stage, so they go themselves, and you get all kinds of cool pseudomer printing and multiple species in your specimens. Here's a very simplified model for how one of these works. You have your intrusive stock. It's placed into limestone, shown here in blue. You develop skarn around it, and then as you work away from the skarn, shown in red is just massive sulfide mineralization. And when you get into the overlying unreactive rocks, mineralization manifests as veins. There's all kinds of alteration that occurs. And this is the model we use to guide exploration. And to a significant degree, this model is based on Santa Eulalia. But as Lauren will tell you, we're diligently trying to find this part of the system, which so far hasn't been found at Santa Eulalia, but we're going to find it sooner or later. So Santa Eulalia really cranked up into production around 1703, and from 1703 to 2014, it produced better than 50 million tons of ores, averaging 11 ounces per ton silver, 15% combined lead and zinc, and in different parts of the district, you got copper, gold, tin, vanadium, indium, gallium, germanium, and cadmium. So all of these things get mixed together and make some of the cool, especially oxide minerals that we see from the district. At one point, there was a mine, there was a bank that was Banco Minero de Chihuahua and Banco Minero de Santa Eulalia. So it was an important district. From 1705 to 1737, 25% of the silver shipped from the New World to Spain came from Santa Eulalia. So that's what silver looks like. Counting the bars, stacking them up, over 500 million ounces of the stuff. That's a lot of production. So in 1867, a gentleman named Governor Lew Wallace, he wasn't governor at the time, but he was a Civil War general, very complicated, initially disgraced, then he was redeemed. After he was relieved of battlefield duty, he was sent to Mexico to keep the French from supplying the Confederacy with munitions and bullets. So he developed a friendship with Benito Juarez, and he spent a lot of time hanging out in Chihuahua, and he went up into the mines with some of his friends from there, and he wrote this article for Harper's New Monthly magazine, which is a lovely detailed description of what Santa Eulalia was like in 1867. This is what the Sierra Santa Eulalia looks like now. So what you're seeing here, this is all the limestone that's the host rock. These are the capping volcanics sitting up over here. This is the view from just outside the Chihuahua airport. And this canyon right here is where the initial discovery of the district was made. So guys came up on horses up this canyon, and they found this outcrop right here at a mine called Parcionera, and that's where the initial discovery was made. And mineralization was followed from that outcrop to the south for 6 kilometers and vertically for over 1,200 meters. That's what it looks like more or less today. Hasn't changed a whole lot in 300 years, other than the fact that there's nobody working there at the moment. And this district produced enough money to build the Cathedral of Chihuahua and this lovely little church, which is still there in the town of Santa Eulalia, right next door to the rock shop of Santa Eulalia. And there's the cathedral in Chihuahua back in 1939. It still looks pretty much the same. It had beautiful silver and stuff like that as decorations. That was all stripped out during the Mexican Revolution by Pancho Villa and his buddies. In the late 1800s, a guy named John Riley Robinson sold his holdings in the Batopilas Silver District out in the Sierra Madre to a gentleman named Alexander Roby Shepherd, who built the, which was the basis of the fame of what we think about for Batopilas. Riley went and invested, picking up the ground at Santa Eulalia, and then he tried unsuccessfully for 10 years to raise enough capital to put the mines into production. And as I say, he was unsuccessful. He died in about 1902, and about 1905, all of the ground came free, and immediately the district was covered by a patchwork quilt of claims. So here's a map from 1920 showing dozens and dozens of claims all over the place covering the district. It was hard hand mining. This is from a picture, this is from a book called Nita, which is actually a religious tract about this little boy in his burrow who, you know, lived in the time of the revolution and the aggressive, greedy mine owners. But it's a wonderful description of the mine operations. So lots of companies floated stock based on operations in the district, and they brought in modern mining technology, steam plants, hoists, the whole bit. When I lived in the district, I lived in that room right there, and I'll point that out in some other pictures. So here's a few years later, and there's that same little room. They've added a little bit to the building, but it's the same place. So this is the Potosi number 5 head frame down here. This is the Buena Tierra head frame up here. These were principal mines. This is the Santo Domingo or Gasolinera shaft over here. Tiro Alto is up here. These mines were gradually consolidated into the control of the Potosi Mining Company and Asarco Mexicana. But it was a very busy place at this period of time. Just another shot of the West Camp from down by town. And the only big dump in the district is this thing right here. And this is now where the baseball field is in the town of Santa Eulalia. And again, my room was right up there. Ore was pulled out of the mines. It was dumped into these aerial tramways. It went down into town. It was put on a train into Chihuahua, which was the nearest water. The city of Chihuahua exists where it is because it's the closest water to the Santa Eulalia mines. And there's the towers coming down through the town of Santa Eulalia for the tramway right there. And that ran up until about 1956. Another view looking down on the town. So there's the church. The rock shop is right over there. That's a view from just a year or two ago. The mines have been in the West Camp have been closed since 1991. The rails have all been pulled up, so you can see where the tracks are. But route for the train that the other comes to a plant right down here. And this is just a little village of Santa Eulalia, 2,000-3,000 people maybe at that time. So I've been working there since 1977. I still work there. I have seen a lot of changes over those times. So here's a mine called the Inglaterra, which is very famous for producing things like creedite, oriented gypsum, beautiful included quartz crystals. A lot of interesting things came out of here. A lot of things were credited as coming out of this mine because this was a place that the collectors could get in and out of by bribing the watchmen at the mine in later years, because that's what it looked like in 1992. Obviously not terribly active, but the shaft was still accessible, and it was easy to get underground and get into the rest of the workings. And that's what it looked like in 2014. Head frame's gone. They started to carve away some of the dumps. There's just not much left in that part of the district now. So we'll look at a couple of different portions of the district. So here's that town of Santa Eulalia, also known as Aquiles Cervantes. The West Camp mines that we've just seen at are here. The San Antonio mine, the East Camp, sits over here on the other side of the range. And again, here's Chihuahua City, which has grown up because of these mines. Chihuahua is a city of about 1.5 million people. You'd be pretty comfortable driving down the streets. You'd recognize Sam's and Applebee's, and all the franchise restaurants you see here have invaded Mexico. That is the Sierra Santa Eulalia right there in the background. The lovely Gateway to Chihuahua statue that's been erected, or sculpture that's been erected at the entrance to the town of Santa Eulalia. It's where you get off the freeway. You drive up into the town. There's those mines that I was showing you pictures of back up in here. So this is the entrance to the town of Santa Eulalia. And if you look around carefully, you can see evidences of its former glory going back to the Spanish era. So there are still some old Spanish constructions here and there, surrounded by some of the more modern things. And of course, they honor their mining heritage pretty extensively here, even though there's no active mining at the moment. That's how the church looks today. That's how it looked inside in 1923. It pretty much looks the same now, although I think there's a new confessional since then. There's the latest version of the Santa Eulalia rock shop, and you can get all kinds of wonderful things from Chino every once in a while. So again, the West Camp, Buena Tierra, Potosi Cinco, Potosi Uno, those are different shafts. So this is all the Potosi mine. And then San Antonio over here, San Antonio El Grande is actually the name of the miners' community. It is not the name of the mine. So if you see labels that say Santa Eulalia El Grande, change them so they just say San Antonio. And so all of these individual mines of the West and East Camp have all been consolidated essentially into these 3 big operations. This is a surface plan map of the ore bodies. So all of these elongate ribbons that you see here are the famous manto deposits from Santa Eulalia. So note the scale. This is 1,000 meters between each of these. So these are extremely long ore bodies, like linguini running through the limestone. In the East Camp, mineralization is controlled by a graben, so the mineralization is much more tabular and vertical than it is in the West Camp. Big differences between them, but clearly part and parcel of the same ore system. Looking from a helicopter down on the West Camp, a few years ago, there's the Potosi number 5 shaft right there. There's the Buena Tierra shaft. My room is right there for scale. So this is what things look like from up above. And you can see this kind of black color to the rock. That's a manganese oxide alteration. So these are the ore bodies of the West Camp. So those are those individual mantos rotated 90 degrees so that the next section makes sense. Its mineralization is controlled by a series of fractures or trends running from Inglaterra all the way to the north to Las Animas. Here's a long composite long section, so that means all of those individual ore bodies are projected into a single plane. Once again, Inglaterra down here, and these series of mantos and chimneys, which are the big vertical ore bodies. This is the biggest ore body in the West Camp. That was about 125 by 150 meters in plan, and 850 meters tall. And you could walk around on the bottom, on the floor of that thing 50 years after they stopped mining, and it looked like they'd swept the floor the day before. The ground in this district stands extremely well. So mineralization was found way up here at that Parcionera where I showed you, and then they followed it all the way to the south and all the way down. And the water has now risen, since the mine has been inactive, the water is right at about the 18 level, which would be right in through here somewhere. This is what mineralization looks like in place. The limestone is the gray here in the middle. The massive sulfides are here. This is a sill of the diabase up above. And so it was just keep that stuff in the face and follow it. And that was the history of 300 years of mining in the district. San Antonio is very different. So we've jumped to the east side of the district. It's controlled by a graben. So you have these big faults that have dropped this block down in the middle. They were then cut across by an intrusive, and then skarn developed around it and massive sulfide mineralization between dikes and sills and developed outward from that. So very different structural control, but again, the same style of mineralization. That's the entire discovery outcrop for the San Antonio mine. This probably produced about 35% of the district's ore, and that outcrop would easily fit in this room. But if you look closely, even though it's oxidized, you can see these fibrous textures in here. This was all massive Edinburghite pyroxene with crystals up to about that long. Looking down on the mill in the San Antonio headframe and the valley off to the east, that valley is full of water. The mine goes down below the water table. Every time they hit a crack, that water table comes right into the mine. That mine can make up to 90,000 gallons of water a minute. It's really hard to keep that out. So this is what we're looking for now. This is the piece we haven't found yet. We found the skarn, we found the chimneys, we found the mantos, we found the veins. This is what Lauren's job is to ramrod, coming up with the money to find the rest of it. So now we'll get a little more into specimens. So again, this is from that book, Chonita. High grading has been a problem at this mine forever. So as the miners came out in the old days, they were carefully searched. And there was a huge cavern, the Grand Cavern of the Potosi mine, beautiful stalactites and stalagmites. That was systematically collected in the 1920s, and a big piece of it is on exhibit at the Denver Museum of Natural History, where it was combined with gypsum crystals from mica. So you look at the cave, and it's got these beautiful aragonite cave formations with these big gypsum, but it's actually a pastiche from two separate mines. We've seen this already, so let's look at some of the sulfides before we get into the oxides. So here's an example of galena. This is complexly spinel-twinned galena. Sphalerite, big tetrahedron. This is from the San Antonio mine. I collected that myself my first summer there. That's about, pardon? It's about 8 centimeters across. Pyrrhotite is one of the principal sulfides. I just learned that they're finding some nice pyrrhotite again. This pyrrhotite's associated with sphalerite. You can see these little galenas that are studding the pyrrhotite. That specimen is this tall. That is a huge pyrrhotite. Pyrite, less common typically, but it gives it makes these funny kind of spherical and rotated aggregates that are very attractive. This is from the San Antonio mine. That's a small cabinet specimen. Arsenopyrite, extremely common in the San Antonio mine. Nice, sharp crystals. That piece is about 6 centimeters across. Chalcopyrite is quite unusual in the district. It is best known from the San Antonio. That's a miniature with some fluorite sitting on top of the chalcopyrite, a little bit of sphalerite for combination, all on quartz, of course. Marcasite is quite rare, but forms really nice, sharp, tabular crystals on white scalenohedral calcite. That's a miniature. And pyrite pseudomorphs after the pyritites. So these are extremely well developed at Santa Eulalia. This is a really important texture because the kinetics of the reactions to sulfidize pyrrhotite to pyrite are extremely slow. So only an ore deposit that sits and stews in its own juice for a long time will ever develop that texture. So you start thinking about where you've seen them. You've seen them from Nika, you've seen them from Dalmagorsk, you've seen them from Bahia Maria, Trepcha, a bunch of places in South America, Bingham Canyon. Big mines show that texture. So from an exploration standpoint, you see that texture, you get pretty excited. It says, I'm digging in the right place. Native silver, despite how much silver the district has produced, relatively little native silver has come out of it. Most of the ore that was processed in the oxide days was argentiferous cerussite, but there are a few places with some nice wire silver. And you get a little bit of acanthite pseudomorphing what was originally argentite. There was a batch of these came out in the 60s. That's a small miniature. And cinnabar is surprisingly common in the periphery of the district. So you get these scalenohedral calcite groups that are preferentially coated with bright red cinnabar. Santa Eulalia produced a little bit of tin. It was actually one of North America's only economic tin deposits back during the Second World War. Microcrystals of cassiterite. Fluorite is ubiquitous in the gangue from the mine. This is a crystal from the San Antonio mine that comes from right at the water table. That's a coating of smithsonite on top of the fluorite. That fluorite's about 7 centimeters on an edge, so it's a big crystal. And fluorite itself got deposited late on top of everything. So you have these quartz groups that are covered with purple fluorite, a miniature. 2 years ago, a big batch of these came out, sharp scalenohedral crystals. That crystal is about 5 centimeters long with a glaze of fine purple fluorite on it. So it makes very attractive specimens. And in some cases, there was so much fluorine floating around, it completely replaced the calcite. So these groups, although they look like they're coated with fluorite, they are fluorite to the core. Sometimes very lightly colored, but sometimes deep gumball purple. Both of those are miniatures. And you even wind up with things like fluorite showing up on the goethite in the Gossan part of the mineralization. Quartz is very common, especially in the San Antonio. Sometimes very nice groups of scepters, sometimes smoky scepters like I got the other day from Kareth. Sometimes they have hematite inclusions in them, giving them this gorgeous red color. And sometimes you have phantoms. This is a manganese oxide coating, a nice sharp termination on the quartz. These are balls of rhodochrosite, also trapped inside this absolutely limpid later stage of quartz. That's a small cabinet. And you get quartz on quartz, and some of these bodies, because the system cycled so many times, you grew a nice sharp quartz crystal, and then quartz came in again later, and you get these bristling porcupine-like groups with all of those crystals essentially perpendicular to the face that they're growing from. That's a small cabinet, but these things get up to this big. Amethyst is uncommon, but does come from the Inglaterra area with a very nice color, looks very similar to the stuff from Tasco. And in San Antonio, you get citrine, looks very much like what you see from Charcas, except at Santa Eulalia, they have little brushes of aragonite incorporated or included in the citrine. That's a cabinet-sized specimen. And this used to be common back in the 60s, the citrine groups that came from the westernmost part of the West Camp with these very elongate, tapered crystals in these starburst groups, sometimes with little tiny fluorites on them. Very attractive material. This stuff came out again about 15 years ago, I'd guess. And because things cycle, you get things like quartz coating calcite. And in the San Antonio mine, on the 13th level, back in 1983 and 4, and then again in 1990, they hit some very nice pockets of ludlamite. This was before the big finds were made in Bolivia, so at the time, these were some of the best ludlamites that you could find anywhere around. Really nice, sharp, elongate crystals, sometimes more coffin-shaped. Also, vivianite came from those same pockets. That crystal is 8 centimeters long. That was in John Barlow's collection. And these pockets were typically also included stalactitic siderite and also siderite pseudomorphs after calcite. That's 8 centimeters long. So there's one of the pseudomorphs. So original scalenohedral calcite and then replaced by iron carbonate. Creedite was very common in the main silicate ore body and in the Inglaterra ore body in the West Camp. Much rarer in the San Antonio. This particular piece is from the San Antonio. This is overgrowing fluorite. It's a miniature. And we'll focus quickly on the main silicate ore body. So when we're talking about main silicate ore body, this one and the Inglaterra silicates, these are weird bodies. They're an iron calcic skarn composed of manganese and phaelite and johanssonitic pyroxene, which just means olivine or pyroxene that's stuffed with manganese. It's a weird form of skarn deposit, and when that hydrates through the evolution of the ore fluid, that stuff breaks down to a mixture of chlorites, it liberates quartz, and it liberates and generates rhodochrosite and a whole bunch of weird microminerals. This is the ore body that's actually being mined at a very small scale at the moment. So there is some new material. For the last couple of years, there's been a bunch of not very exciting botryoidal rhodochrosite coming out, along with just a few nice crystal specimens. So sharp, gemmy crystals. That crystal on the left is almost a centimeter long. Really nice groups of doubly terminated scalenohedral crystals. That's a large cabinet specimen. The fairy ring, this is a thumbnail. This came out in 2013. This bizarre ring of rhodochrosite. This also came out in 2013. Only specimen I've ever seen like it. The rhodochrosite with nice sharp octahedral green fluorites. That's a cabinet specimen. And this is the long lost Desert Museum rhodochrosite. That was the size of my palm. Those crystals were that long. They were comparable to anything you've ever seen from Chwaning. And it was traded out of the Desert Museum to Kurt Van Scriver 2 weeks before he was killed in a car wreck in a dust storm up by Eloy. Specimen has never been seen before. It was not found in the wreckage. Nobody knows what happened to it, but I would dearly love to know what happened to it. Even just to hold it again, because I got to. It was in the museum out there at the Desert Museum in the vault. Also get microcreedite in that ore body that makes these nice starbursts. And then when you get under the microscope and start looking around, you see these beautiful oriented overgrowths of the white cutnahorite on the edges of the rhodochrosite. You get all kinds of complex fluorites. The crystallography on some of these, they look like basketballs or soccer balls. They've got so many different faces the field of view there is probably 0.5 centimeter. But really gorgeous micromaterial. Nice sharp sphalerite, again associated with the fluorites. You get some weird things like argentopite every once in a while, and that's actually associated with little tiny plates of polybasite. So that entire crystal group is 5 millimeters. Very rare proustite, easy to overlook and think you're looking at rhodochrosite, but crystallography is not right. Hubnerite, commonly with these kind of fuzzy crew cut type terminations on them. Beautiful deep red color. Very rarely you can find nice sharp white hydroxyl apatite crystals growing on the rhodochrosite. These things fluoresce brilliant orange, so if you've got a bunch of the material, it's easy to find if you just scan it with your UV light. And lots of combinations of rhodochrosite with the kronstadite is what most of this chlorite-looking material is, the jacobsite being these funny little metallic spheres, and you'll see dozens of different combinations of these. But you look at this material that comes from there, it's typically really vuggy, and you look down in the vugs, and there's just a whole world of microminerals in there. Nice sharp hematite plates. And some weird rare things like natonite, which is a manganese tin oxide, forms these limpid octahedra, and they're actually zoned. They include wickmanite and jeanbandiite and all kinds of strange things like that, and they're easy to be mistaken for danelite, which is a member of the helvite family, which is also common in the ore body. So backing off to real scale again, Eulalia and CRDs in general are full of calcite. I mean, part of the reason is that they're placed in a thick section of what is effectively calcite. You dissolve that, you reprecipitate it, and every void you can imagine gets filled with calcite in one way or another. And the question is this ore related? Is this pre-ore? Is it not ore related? Is it related to oxidation? There's a bunch of different things you can do. Ultraviolet light's the easiest way to tell them apart because most of the ore-related calcites like this scalenohedral group from the San Antonio are orange to orange pink fluorescent. And you get these nice sharp, these are called diente de perro, which just means dog tooth in Spanish, but tons of this brown, not terribly attractive calcite leaves Santa Eulalia on a weekly basis and vanishes forever. We have no idea where it goes because you don't see very much of it in people's collections or anywhere else, unless you get an example like this with these cute little red fluorites growing all over the stuff. Rarely you'll get iron oxides included in them, so you get these brilliant orange groups of sharp, shiny scalenohedras. And the multi-stage, what are called mariposa or butterfly calcites with an early scalenohedral phase shown here, typically coated by iron oxide to give it this nice chocolate brown coating, and then this limpid later stage of iron oxide or later stage of polymorphic, thank you, calcite growing on top of it. So these form twins and multiple twins. These things used to come out in quantity. We used to buy these things for $1 a piece. I've seen these for sale for $300 and $400 and $500 in the last few years. And this just is, these are computer generated growth drawings from Pete Richards showing the early scalenohedral stage and then this later combination of scalenohedral and rhombohedrals. So that shows you crystallographically how that overgrowth works. A big cave was found in the early 2000s. This is like a war club stalactite. That thing is this long. One of the cool things about it is you're looking right down the C-axis of the thing right here. So these are coming out at 120 degrees to each other. This calcite has this lovely light yellow color. If you leave it in the sun for 20 minutes, it'll turn pink. Distinctly pink. If you leave it in the sun for half an hour, it goes white and stays white forever. If you take it after 20 minutes and put it in the dark, in 24 hours it will revert to yellow. And you can put it out in the sun, and you can do it back and forth, and you can make the color change. A lot of manganese calcite, just like at Nika and other places, so you get these lovely light pink colors. There's very similar material from Nika, and that's what happens when you hit those with a UV light. They really glow. And based on the work we're doing studying the luminescent character of what we call fugitive calcite, we can now determine that manganese gives you the orange color. So that's manganese is the activator that kicks off the fluorescence, and then lead is a sensitizer and shifts the color in the direction of red. So you can actually map your way through one of these systems if you understand the significance of the difference between the oranges and the pinks in these things. And just like everything else, calcite grows on top of everything. So that's a quartz coated by fluorite, coated by later calcite. And there's a nice twinned calcite with lovely little sharp red siderite rhombohedra all over it. That's a miniature. And like all these systems, multi-stage, so you have early coarse rhombohedral calcite, a little bit of quartz coming off the top, a little bit of sulfite, and then it's covered by these micro rhombohedral dolomites, giving a lovely pearly effect to it. That thing's about 4 centimeters, 5 centimeters across. Celestine is very rare, but it does occur late in the system. That's a beautifully twinned crystal. That's about 3 centimeters long. And that's leading us into the world of sulfates. So like Nika, Santa Eulalia had its cave of giant gypsum crystals. Again, that's Bob Jones crawling into it in '78. And that's what the crystal looked like inside. And there's my good friend Dionisio Maldonado, who is the chief mine geologist, hanging out, waiting for the gringos to do whatever they were doing with this bunch of crystals. This cave was found by accident. They were driving a decline, and they bumped into the edge of it. Just this little hole, and they stuck their head in, and they saw all these crystals, and so they closed it off, which really didn't stop things because the mine manager sold the keys to somebody for a couple of $1,000s, and over the course of a couple of years, all of these crystals were stripped out of there. There's Peter Lickberg, the famous Swedish collector, with a gypsum from the pocket, and you can see that it has been very nicely etched with flowers and other patterns like this. This was done by some miner, so I mean, Scrimshaw using gypsum. It's a new concept, but no, it's an old concept, but a new application of the old concept. So we've got all this sulfide. What happens when you oxidize it? So when you oxidize the sulfide, you flush out the zinc, you flush out a bunch of the iron, you flush out a bunch of sulfur. That means you have open space. Everything collapses into it. You get these big blocks of argentiferous cerussite floating in this iron oxide matrix. And you get these caverns that are lined with helictitic cave formations. And the old-time miners would break into these caves, and they would pry up the floor. They'd pry the stuff off the site from underneath their feet. Well, they left all the stuff on the ceiling, and when you can get back into one of these stopes, These are the kinds of specimens that come out. A big cave of this stuff was found 3 or 4 years ago. It's an amazing amount of material came out of there. A big bunch of it is going to be a pocket reconstruction or cave reconstruction at the Houston Museum. These things are incredibly fragile. It is a statistical function how many of them actually survive the process of being collected and then carted to wherever their ultimate home is going to be. The miners, they're called them figurinis or figurines in reference to, like dancers and things like that moving around, alluding to their shape. And then weird things happen, like you get a snake that falls into one of these caves and deteriorates and gets coated by aragonite. So you have the snake's vertebrae here, and you can see the individual ribs that have broken off and fallen off to the side. And all of that has been coated by aragonite, which has this lovely pale whitish blue fluorescence. Secondary gypsum forms all over the place in these beautiful ram's horns. Okay, that's a full-on curlicue. And you wind up with things like those nice spinel twin gypsums that have oxidized to a mixture of anglesite and cerussite, but still retain that beautiful sharp form. You do get a lot of cerussite, typically not very well crystallized, but occasionally you get some very nice little twins, trillings. And when you get under the microscope, you can find the silver halides, which is why the ore was so high grade and so easy to process back in the Spanish era. All you had to do was take the stuff, put it in a cupellation furnace, heat it up, and in 24 hours you had a pile of silver. So the lead oxide minerals include mimetite in pretty substantial quantities from an area on the 8th to 13th level of the Potosi mine especially. This sort of butterscotch cauliflower. Wolfenite probably was much more common in the old days than it turned out to be, recently, but there are a few really magnificent yellow, sharp wolfenites from the West Camp. This find came out in sometime in the mid-90s, I think. And one of the rarities of the mineral world is colorless wolfenite. Richard Bordeaux used to maintain that colorless wolfenite was one of the rarest forms of wolfenite that you could ask for. Secondary calcite, all over the place. Nice sharp rhombohedral. A lot of this stuff gets mislabeled as dolomite. And that calcite overgrows things, so you get these beautiful sunbursts of malachite encased in calcite. One of the more famous pseudomorphs in the district, goethite after gypsum. So you have these big coarse gypsum groups. They got coated with goethite. The gypsum got leached out, so these things are completely hollow. And some of them form really attractive groups with a little late calcite on top of them. That's a large cabinet specimen, pretty much universally called the shipwreck. Just a little bit of uranium floating around, probably derived from the overlying rhyolitic volcanics, but it makes some very nice micros of skladowskite, typically encased in gypsum. So these are, some of these are well over 1/2 centimeter across. And sometimes you see them included in the ram's horn gypsum, giving it a bright yellow color. So zinc is really interesting in these systems. It's highly soluble. You can see the difference here. Here's the sulfide ores. These were found in the oxide zone. So domains of unreplaced, unoxidized sulfides, 13.5% lead, 12% zinc, almost 30% iron, 26% sulfur, specific gravity of 4.2. The oxides surrounding it still had 13, little bit of enrichment, 13.9% lead. Zinc is down to 1.8, so 85% of the zinc has been flushed out. Little bit of the iron has been flushed out. Almost 95% of the sulfur has been flushed out. Your specific gravity has gone from 4.2 to 2.4. So that's a loss of 43% of the volume. So at the process of oxidizing this, you're generating enormous amounts of open space that your secondary minerals can grow into, and they do. And what happens with the zinc is because it's so soluble, it gets flushed out into fractures and everything below the lead portion of the ore body. And then when the chemistry changes enough, it reprecipitates. And it does things like reprecipitating as smithsonite. In this particular case, on goethite, which itself was the oxidation of a coprinid rudist, which was a fossil that had been replaced by pyrite. So the fossil was in the rock, got replaced by pyrite, got oxidized, and then you deposit smithsonite on top of it. Like Ohoyla, you do see some very nice adamites at Santa Eulalia. These are micros, but balls up to the size of a Thompson seedless grape and resembling them are found in a few locations in the mine. You get purple adamite. There's lots of manganese in this system. That's a cabinet specimen. So you have these lovely dark purple early cores and then these sort of architectural shells of green adamite growing around them. There was only one find of this as far as I know. Very rare, but Santa Eulalia does have some legrandite. I believe 5 or maybe 6 specimens are known, including one faceted gemstone. That's a small miniature. And hemimorphite. Buckets and buckets and buckets of hemimorphite. I have been inside caves in this mine with rinds of hemimorphite this thick, with only the last outside of the rind being well crystallized. It's been known for a long time. So this is a German crystallographic publication from the turn of the last century describing all of the crystal faces on some of the hemimorphites from Santa Eulalia. That's a 3 centimeter, absolutely limpid crystal of hemimorphite. Much more common to see them milky. This is from a big find that was made in 91 or 2. These crystals are almost at 90 degrees to each other. And those crystals are about 5, remarkable specimen. Sometimes it's iron oxide, which gives you a nice brilliant orange-red color. And you'll very commonly, from buckets that those come from, you'll get these goethite stalactites covered by brilliant calcite crystals. And sometimes those have the iron oxides included in them. And sometimes they're very red, sometimes they're 50-50. Chalcophenite, common as botryoidal aggregates, nice black contrast to the white of the hemimorphite. And where the mobilization of zinc really gets interesting is in the San Antonio mine, where you had zinc-rich mineralization all the way to the paleo surface, and then with oxidation, all of that zinc got flushed out, and redeposited at the water table. So you flush all the zinc out of here, it comes down, hits the water table, and it begins to dump out. So you get these big botryoidal masses of hemimorphite. That thing is the size of a lunchbox. Sometimes it picks up a little bit of orichalcite, so it gives nice blue color to it. The black that you see on the edges here, those are micro inclusions of platnerite. So that ball is about 4 centimeters across. And so some of that is above the water table, but right at the water table is where all the smithsonite dumps out. So there's this enormous cave that runs the whole length of the mine at the water table. Most of it is lined with this ropey, gray, boring smithsonite that you could mine by the ton if you were so inclined. But some other interesting things happened. There were caves lined with scalenohedral calcite, and some of those have been completely replaced by smithsonite, like this particular kind of bone white. That piece is this big across. So those were pretty healthy calcites to begin with. You get some cadmium floating around, so that shows up, turning your smithsonite yellow. This is a nice stalactite, about 6 centimeters long. There were some big masses of this produced in the late 70s, early 80s. And then in the early 2000s, we got cadmium smithsonite replacing scalenihedral calcite with this brilliant lime green color. That plate is about so big across. And then there's the green smithsonites with hemimorphite. And this is your piece, isn't it? No? Okay, I should have a picture of yours. Anyway, there was a very small pocket with this lovely green color. Kareth got what I still think is the best piece. This is the one I apparently have the picture of. That stalactite is about that tall. I think yours was on exhibit here last year or the year before, wasn't it? You had yours on exhibit last year or the year before, didn't you? 2 years ago, yeah. And then in, I want to say 96, somewhere around there, they were building a new underground work area where they were an underground shop where they were going to work on the underground equipment. And as they started carving the rock away to get to it, they started picking up these little blue rice grain smithsonite specimens. That's a miniature associated obviously with hemimorphite, but these beautiful, we were pretty excited when we saw these and went, wow, we'll take this. This is pretty nice. And they kept on mining and it started to get better. That's the size of my hand. And then finally, it started coming out with things like cerussite associated with it and anglicite associated with it, and some really nice groups of nice sharp anglicite showing up with the smithsonite, and then auricalcite with this intense blue color. That's a small miniature, and that's cerussite sitting on top of it up there on the top. Then the blues started to get really good. And that piece is this big, as blue as anything you would ever hope to see from the Kelly or anywhere else on the planet. Magnificent material, one-time find. But it was a pretty decent sized find, not of quality like this, but it was a good sized find. And some of these are just exquisitely attractive smithsonites. And they're all mine. So I've been collecting Eulalia a long time. Gracias for your attention. And I'm happy to answer any questions. Tucson Gem and Mineral Show theme this year, green minerals. Next year, we're celebrating the bisesquicentennial. So the theme next year will be red, white, and blue. Tell your friends, come to the main show, volunteer to put on an exhibit, and enjoy the minerals. That's what we're here for. Thank you. Yes?
Can you give a judgment as to sort of like a mine life reserve? So how many years can you produce a great?
Well, those are two separate issues because there's virtually nothing in terms of what you would call a reserve in the mines. So the mines are not producing on an industrial level. On the other hand, there are groups of individuals who go underground sometimes for 2 or 3 days at a time, collecting of their own volition wherever they can go in the mine. And what we see, even though the mines are not in active production, is every year or two, a major find seems to come out of Eulalia, like the giant cave full of calcites that came out 3 or 4 years ago, and the rhodochrosites that are coming out now. So as long as there's underground access, and as long as there's people who can make a living, because people like us keep buying the stuff that they dig, I think they'll be mining specimens there for a very long time. And the ground is extremely stable, so except for a few limited places, there's no reason to think the workings are going to collapse. So they just keep on digging.
So on a sort of annual basis, now in the near future, how many different little groups of miners are there?
I'd say there's probably a half a dozen groups. I mean, they typically go down 2 or 3 or 4 at a time. And again, because of the distances, they got to go down hundreds of meters on ladders and then walk horizontally for kilometers. So they'll stay underground for days at a time. And then they have to pack whatever they find out on their back. And some of that stuff is being packed back up 500, 600 meters of ladders on somebody's back. And then they bring this stuff into the local community where there's people who sell minerals. And then gringos come down to buy the stuff and complain about the prices that they're asking without thinking about how much work went into collecting those specimens. So if you're like Dennis or me and you pay a reasonable amount for the specimen, they'll be good to you.
You mentioned the silicate ore body is presently being mined in a small scale.
Yep.
Is that being mined for the
Silver. Yeah, the silicate ore body runs about 400 grams silver. And so they are mining maybe 250 tons a day. If they're really lucky, it's probably half that most days. They have a crusher that they run it through. They put it in a truck and they drive it 350 kilometers to a mill in Santa Barbara in southern Chihuahua. So whoever's got the trucking contract is making money, but nobody else is. Probably the custom mill is making money too, but it's a real shoestring operation, and they just can't get more out of the mine than that. So it will always be. It made sense when the San Antonio mill was in operation just 8 kilometers away on the east side of the mountain, but once that closed, the economics changed for the worse.
Is it just too expensive to pump out?
San Antonio?
Yeah.
The problem with and that's an interesting question, because the San Antonio mine, because it makes so much water, and historically what they did was grout off the fractures. They mapped the fractures with their drilling, they pumped grout into them, and then they mined up close to it, and then they would lather, rinse, repeat, and work their way through. That's really high cost mining. And every once in a while they would hit a fracture that they didn't know about, and that would flood the mine to the water table overnight. And over the years, a few miners have died. Fortunately, not very many. There's a number of stories of guys who were in the stopes when the water level started to come up, and they just sort of basically treaded water in the shaft and waited and rode it up to the water table where they were done. But so you've got, on the east side of the mountain, you've got this massive water table loaded with water. On the other side, you have the city of Chihuahua, which is dying of thirst. And the logical thing is to extend a tunnel from the San Antonio mine through the mountain, and then the water would actually run more or less by gravity to the city of Chihuahua, and you would solve 2 problems at once. And the state government of Chihuahua is actually implementing that now. Yep. Yes, Dave.
Go back to that last picture. What's the dendrite?
It's a little dendritic growth of, it may be smithsonite, I don't know, but it is a carbonate on the surface of the smithsonite. Nobody else? Well, thanks again for your attention. Enjoy.
And that was Dr. Peter Megaw, as I said, giving you a absolutely master class, top-notch presentation. So for those of you who tuned in and you weren't sure if I was really just making stuff up regarding Peter's expertise on the subject, I think you now know. The man is the man. And for those of you wondering about the shirt that he was wearing, and you can see that shirt right there. Oh, he's taking it off. Let's cut back quickly to me. That's a What's Hot in Tucson shirt. Why is he wearing a What's Hot in Tucson shirt? Because Peter Megaw is one of the two co-hosts of What's Hot in Tucson. The other co-host being, of course, lovely Lauren Megaw. And so it's a father-daughter team going with me through Tucson, doing all the interviews. Speaking of which, about 6 minutes ago, the What's Hot in Tucson 2025 live interview that we did with Danny Trinchillo from Fine Minerals International just went live about 5 minutes ago. The full interview will be on the What's Hot in Tucson program when that gets released later this year. And that was a 4.5 hour filming session yesterday. Easily the longest What's Hot in Tucson we have ever filmed with Daniel. But you are going to be pretty blown away by what we filmed. Hopefully we'll get to show you most of it. Sometimes there are some pieces that we do have to drop out just because of owners of the pieces prefer not to have it on the broadcast. But we do film it, but Danny and I then have to go through and call out what we're not allowed to show. But there is a live segment that just went online. Check out Blue Cat Productions, all the places you are right now. Blue Cat Productions YouTube channel, Blue Cat Productions Facebook page, and Instagram page. And you can see the latest. And this is highlighting this incredible new find, the Valentine's Day find at the Eagle's Nest mine. So incredible crystallized gold. If you're here in Tucson, it is right now on display in Fine Minerals International, which is right next door to us here at the Tucson Fine Mineral Gallery. If you're gonna not be able to come till a little bit later, that display is gonna go away. But it's going over to the TGMS show. So if you don't get here in time to see that display at National House, make sure you make it to the TGMS show, because that is going to be on full display. And what you see on the video, as most of you know, it is nothing but live. So make sure you check that out. It is well worth your while. Come back to us tomorrow. We have got Mendara and Todd Wakes. He told me, and I keep probably getting it wrong. Anyway, they're going to be on, and they're going to be talking about Mary's fantastic jewelry design, the Gargantus, and what she did to create it. It was the 2023 AGTA Spectrum Award winner. Mary won also a new Spectrum Award for a ring design that she just did. It's down at the AGTA right now, but they're going to talk about that, and all the garnets in the Garganta those are Todd's garnets. So they're kind of they make a great team, and she gives a great presentation. So tune in tomorrow for that, 2 p.m. Tucson time, and check out the schedule for all the other great presentations we have going up. I'm gonna go ahead and show some of them as we tune out for the day to a little bit of music. Have a fantastic day. Hope to see all of you back here tomorrow. Take care. Peace out.